Here are your hosts, Nicole Jacinto and Nikki De Vega.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Wake up, it's 11:15 already and you are tuned into DZRJ 8:10 a.m., the voice of the Philippines. The show is Mind Your Own Business and we are helping you figure out how to mind your own business. Today we're going to talk about the business of, well, show business. Okay, so Vanessa,
Yes.
I understand that two very special people are listening to you today. Do you want to say hi to them before we... No, we'll just leave them anonymous. Okay. So I want to give you a hard time because they're listening. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Actually, okay, let's talk about show business. Can you give us an example of somebody who may work in show business, and let's start from there. Like what kind of job? Let's say
For example, a reporter or for example, Jasonza.
Broadcast.
A broadcaster.
a broadcaster. Okay. So that's okay, broadcaster in the sense that here, let me ask you something. Broadcaster in the sense that they talk about lifestyle programs, or is it like a news anchor?
News anchor.
News anchor. Okay. So you consider that show business?
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay. That is show business because you're on TV, you're broadcasting. That's part of it. I was just making a point there about how, like, you shouldn't believe everything you hear on the news because sometimes it's all about show business and propaganda. Anyway, but not on this station. Not on this station. By the way, don't forget our numbers 897-8374, 895-4460, and 895-4244. Okay, so let's say you're a broadcaster or a news anchor. Is this radio or TV or both?
Both.
Okay, let's say both.
For
Let's talk about the status. Okay, when you work, okay, I know a little bit about this, but I'll leave it to you guys. When you work, let's say as a broadcaster, there are questions that arise like, are you an employee? You get a salary? You get a fee? Are you considered a consultant, a freelancer? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and what your rights are, or what you usually can expect to get paid, or what kind of benefits you might expect from an employer.
Go, Vanessa.
Okay. So there are actually four tests to determine whether or not there is employer-employee relationship between the people who are working in a broadcasting company. So first test is the selection or engagement of employees. And next is the payment of wages and the power of dismissal. Lastly is the power of control.
Okay, so let's go to the first one. What is the first one again? The
selection and engagement of employees.
Selection and engagement of employees. Okay, so can you describe that process to us and tell us how that determines whether or not you're an employee or you're a freelancer, or whatever it is you are, you're a talent. Because sometimes in broadcasting we call them talents, and if you're a talent, you're not really an employee, but you get paid a certain fee. So maybe you can tell us about that first process, or that first test, as you called it.
If the company has the power to select the employee, like the kind of qualifications that they must possess in order for them to do their job, that is one indication that they are an employee of that broadcasting company.
Okay, so if the company says you have to be able to speak a certain way, or you have to look a certain way or dress a certain way,
yes.
Let's say when you're on camera, or you have to have a degree in broadcasting, or maybe let's say you're covering, I don't know, in political or news events, you have to have some experience in that, then that actually is a step in determining that you are an employee.
Yes.
How come? Because they're putting why is it considered that way? Is it because they're putting conditions on you, or...
Yes, because the broadcasting company sets the qualifications, and they determine the control or the extent of the control that they have with respect to their employees.
Okay, so if you're an employer out there and you're setting qualifications, keep in mind that that's already a step towards actually employing someone, and not just having them on as a consultant or a talent, and then you're like, well, I don't have to give them benefits or all these things. We know that comes into play when you consider, when you're on both ends of the spectrum, when you're either an employee looking for a job, or looking for a venue where you can express yourself and be your artistic self, or do your craft, or whether you're an employer looking for people to who can fill the need that your company has. How about the second? Can you name the second test again?
The payment of wages.
Okay, payment of wages. That's important. Sorry, I'm writing it down. I also want to learn. Am I getting paid? Yes. Okay. No. Okay, payment of wages. Okay, let's talk about that. How does that affect, or does it define the employee-employee
Not
relation?
necessarily. It depends on those four tests. But one indication that an employee is an employee of that company is when the principal or the employers pay them the respective wages.
So that's one indication. What do you mean by wages? Because, for example, does it have to be a specific monthly wage, or can it just be?
Well, you have to actually distinguish the amount that you're gonna receive, if it is a wage or a compensation based on contract. Because, for example, wages, then if it's a wage, there is an employer-employee relationship, and the amount of the wage received by the employer should comply with the minimum wage orders of the Department of Labor. So if it in turn is in compensation based on contract, then that's a different thing. That doesn't mean that you're an employee just because you receive a particular amount.
You're right. Okay, so let's say this. Well, I don't want to talk about this. Right? Just kidding. Okay, so let's say a radio or TV station had somebody come and do some shows, or as you mentioned, maybe you want to come out on TV, you want to do some shows, whatever the content of the shows may be. Now, if the employer or the company, the broadcasting company, specifies that you are contractual, let's say it's a 6-month contract or a 1-year contract, and that you're to be paid, let's say, 10,000 pesos a month for the services that you render, then you're not necessarily an employee, right?
Not necessarily. Well, what's the situation again? You receive a particular amount.
Yeah, let's say 10,000 pesos.
And you're tasked to do what?
Let's say go on the air and present your show, or write, because the writers do write content for a certain show. But it's when you start working there in that broadcasting company or whatever it is, it's specified in your this is a contract. Like you're a contractual worker. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're an employee, right?
Well, because of the contract, you're a contractual employee.
Okay, so you're a contractual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because to determine whether or not you're an employee, you have to look at the 4 full tests, or the tests which Vanessa already mentioned. So if the situation passes those tests, then the person is considered as an employee.
Okay, so even if it states in your contract that you are not to receive, you can agree, right? Like, for example, there's a contract, you're not going to receive any, let's say, healthcare benefits or whatever. You just get a fee for showing up, let's say, 3 hours of 5 times a week, or you for writing content for certain shows. You could be an employee, but you don't have to avail of all of the benefits that are offered, that are mandated under the law. Yes, Vanessa.
Yes, because their relationship would be governed by their contract.
Okay.
So if it's stated there that they won't be receiving any healthcare or Medicare benefits, then that would be the governing rule between them.
And that's perfectly legal.
That is if the person is not considered an employee.
Yes.
Aha, okay, so let's get to the third. I know you mentioned 4. So, okay, so we're talking a little bit, the first, selection and engagement. Second was payment of wages. What is the third again? Can you just say it again? The power of dismissal. Okay, the power of dismissal. And the fourth is the power of control. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So the power of dismissal, let's talk about that. What exactly does power of dismissal mean?
It's actually a management prerogative wherein they can hire, transfer, or dismiss, discharge, or recall an employee. So it's one of the indications that there is an employee-employee relationship.
Okay, so if you can be fired,
Yeah.
then
In simple terms, that's it.
Yeah,
you
if
just
you can
tell the
be
person
fired.
you no longer work here.
You mentioned no transfer. Like, let's say they say, oh well, you know what, we have a TV station or whatever it is here, in Metro Manila, but we want to transfer you to Basilan. then their
Yes,
employer.
it may be an indication.
It may be an indication. Okay, so power of dismissal. And the last is power of control.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about power of control. Just touch on the topic before we go on a break. Power of control, what exactly is that?
That's the most important test in determining employer-employee relationship. It means the power of the employer to control not only the end result of the work, but also the means and the methods in achieving those results.
Okay, I like that. So, okay, let's, for example, let's power of, you said the power of the ends of the work and also the method. So, if the company or the employer is, telling the talent, let's call them a talent, you have to do it a certain way.
Yeah.
You have to gather, let's say, your information this way. You have to say what this writer writes and puts up and edits. You cannot kind of go off script and talk too much about that. And then your program or whatever it is has to guest certain people. You have to feature certain people. Then that's what we're talking about here in terms of the power of control.
But that would have to be qualified. Because,
Okay.
Yes, because if the person is considered a talent, then that may be considered an independent contractor.
Okay.
So it would no longer be an employer-employee relationship.
Okay, so if that person, let's say, is an independent contractor, and is there a scenario? I'm sure there's a scenario wherein a person is an independent contractor, but they also can't just do whatever they want.
Yes.
Right? Like, for example, they can't take off their clothes on TV or have, like, a bunch of people come over naked and talk about all these topics or whatever that the broadcasting company is not comfortable with or that they don't want aired.
Yes.
But in that case, it's not necessarily yet an employer-employee relationship. It's just how is that? It's just that they qualify what they can put on.
Yes, that would depend on the agreement between the parties. For example, the independent contractor would only be minding his own account, the providing for the articles, the tools and equipments, and for example, the machineries.
Okay.
He's going to.
Yeah, that's also another important thing, because you need equipment, you need resources when you put on a show. So if, for example, you have all your own stuff, then you can be considered an independent contractor. But if you use also all the stuff that the company has, then you might be an employee.
Yes.
Unless they rent it out to you for their use,
Yes.
which is inserted in the fee.
But in one case, actually, one decided case by the Supreme Court, even if the broadcasting company provided such tools, equipments, machineries, the person involved was considered an independent contractor or a talent because he was engaged specifically for the job because of his talents or skills.
You know what that brings to mind? Okay, we've been talking about broadcasters and all that. Let's talk about, let's say, singers.
Yeah.
And performers who hold concerts, because that's a little bit more like, how can they be qualified as employees? Because let's say there are production companies or producers that hire them. We bring a lot of foreigners over, or also even our local talents, like when they put on shows. So they're not technically employees, right? Let's talk a little bit more about that when we return from the short break. We're just gonna do the VOA news and play a few other reminders. And don't forget, you can call us at 897-8374, 895-4460, or 895-4244. You can also text us by typing RJAM, that's all caps. Leave a space and then type your message and send it to 2256. We'll be right back, so stay tuned.